Hi everyone, my name's Alice and today I'm going to talk to you a bit about communications, particularly in the social science field and in the field of humanitarian action and when those two come together. So to start off, I'm going to introduce the idea of the communications journey. So this is an idea that you can use to think strategically about how you'd like to communicate your work. We use the analogy of the destination, the bus, and the bus stop. To start with, the destination refers to your objectives. You need to decide where you're going and what you want to do. For these, we would recommend that they are SMART objectives, that is, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For example, it's not good enough just to say, I'd like to raise awareness of this topic. We want to know where, we want to know by how much you would like to do that. It needs to be relevant to the people that you want to communicate with and to your own work. And ideally, you want to say within 6 months, within a year, and give it some time. The next thing you think about is who you want on the bus with you to get to your destination. This is a really important part of communications, and we often talk about really trying to define our audiences. So thinking clearly about who you need on your side in order to achieve your objective is really important here. So, for example, will you need on your side the local government officials, or perhaps somebody working in a local NGO, or do you need on your side a researcher, some media professionals such as journalists, or do you need local leaders on your side too? So this is a really important part of the work. You can map out who it is that you need on your bus in order to get to your destination. Quite often we have used the persona approach to flesh out those ideas a bit further. Using the persona approach can be really helpful because it forces you to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to reach. For example, if we want to target with our communications the Minister for Health in a particular country, the persona approach can help us think through what their daily challenges are, what they do in terms of tasks every day, what motivates them to get their work done, and most importantly, thinking about how they tend to get their information. That last one is really important because that consideration of how they get their information should dictate the choices that you make when you're choosing what kind of formats to use in the way you present your work, or indeed what events to go to and who to talk to once you're at those events. So the third part of the communications journey is the bus stop. What do we mean by that? By that, we mean thinking really carefully about the key opportunities to get people on board. So those could be also described as hooks for your work. So these could be large scale international days, for example, World Food Day, World Health Day, anniversaries of particular epidemics or pandemics. There's often a lot of conversation generated around those anniversaries, but it could also be something much more local and smaller in scale, but very specific to what you want to achieve. For example, do you know when the budget is decided in your local government? Thinking about when those budgetary cycles are happening, those are really good key opportunities for some people to achieve their objectives. So it's really about thinking about what is the really opportune moment to get your work across. And this could be budget meetings. It could be when the agenda is being set for meetings that are planned months in advance. So the more that you can get in with the people organising that sort of thing, the more targeted you could be. So I'm just going to talk quickly about how we can translate some complex information into engaging communications. So I think it's really important to remember that we communicate not just with words, but with ourselves verbally and also using visuals. People often forget presentations as communications products, but they really are a very important opportunity for you to passionately describe your work and to come across well. So some of the key principles of communicating clearly, especially when you're talking about complex information, are to know your audience. So this is what we discussed before about who you want on your bus with you to get to your destination, and really tailor the content of what you're doing to your audience. You need to have a clear message. The information might be complex. It needs to come across very clearly. And don't be scared to run what you're saying, what you want to say, past someone who doesn't have knowledge of the subject in order to get some good feedback on whether it's clear or not. Don't just go to your peers who understand all of the jargon. And we want to try and avoid that jargon. We also talked about finding a clear hook in terms of the key opportunities to get people on board. Keeping it short and sweet is much better. People don't have a super long attention span. You should also think carefully about using stories in your work where it's appropriate. That could be a really, really powerful way to get information across. And it doesn't have to be in a way that compromises the anonymity of the people you work with. It could be an amalgamation of individuals, anonymized, a very powerful way to get the information there. And feel free to use visuals. There's plenty of good photos out there. You can take some yourself as well. Use diagrams, use infographics, and use videos. So obviously there's lots of different types of communications. You can have blogs, videos, presentations, policy briefs, social media posts, for example, on X or Twitter. LinkedIn is very popular at the moment, and we're seeing really good engagement there. And you can also use diagrams and infographics, as I said, but the sky is the limit. I'm just going to really quickly give you an example of some of the journey of communications in terms of creating accessible and relevant content from quite complex information. So, for example, with SHAP, we initially created a brief. This is something that we did quite a few times. We would create a brief, then we could create a condensed version of that in an infographic, which could be used as a series of slides for people who were time poor and needed to get the information quickly. Then we condensed that further using the infographics into a Twitter thread. So this is quite a systematic and effective way to share the information. It's just about repackaging it for different audiences. And in all of those, we are linking back to where people can find the most information, which is in the brief. Another really important part of the journey of communications is being ready to respond in the moment. This can be uncomfortable if you feel your research isn't ready yet, but it's really important, especially with the type of work that social scientists working together with humanitarian practitioners are doing. Quite often there are emergency situations, you are asked to comment on certain things. But in those moments, if your research isn't ready, you might have emerging findings that you can speak to, but you also will have your grounding and your principles that you can call back and bring into the conversation. So it's really important to be positioned well and to respond quickly to journalists who are working on a tight deadline, and definitely don't dismiss the request just because you're not prepared to talk about research that's unfinished. Because you do have something to say, you have your grounding, you have your principles, and you don't have to have a fully published paper in order to comment. You're being approached because you're an expert, and so you can answer that call. So that was a very, very quick introduction to communication for in social science and humanitarian action and those working together. There are further resources in the blurbs and in the repositories, and thank you very much for listening.